pro-Palestine activists have now been arrested.
And question for you, did the slave trade really make Britain rich? Kemi Badenoch has said colonialism played only a minor role in Britain's wealth and the empire might have actually cost more cash than it made. Is she right?
It was only yesterday that we were talking about all these migrants going missing, that the Home Office had lost track of potentially thousands of migrants. Yep. And now today we're getting confirmation that actually detention. You can
tell he's been on the telly for too long.
Detonation. That sounds like things are blowing up.
No,
certainly not.
Not that we know of, no.
People are being detained now, which seems like a much more practical response than just hoping they turn up for their weekly or bi-weekly check-in.
Well, yes, because people were saying this would never happen. But it does seem as though this policy is moving along. It is progressing. There are pictures which we'll show you in just a minute of essentially this first phase of detention underway. The Home Office has said they're preparing for their first flight now in 9 to 11 weeks. They say this is another big milestone towards enacting their pledge to stop the votes. What do you make of it all? We will show you the pictures very shortly.
Yes, we'll bring you those images. Some are saying it looks very heavy-handed. Some are saying it looks desperately authoritarian, but I suppose you have to remember in all of this, these are people with no right to be in the United Kingdom, and the ultimate goal of this policy is to stop people coming across by small boat in the first place. Will it work? Won't it work? And how many will go across to Rwanda? Join in the discussion, gbnews.com/your say. But we'll get to all of that after your headlines with Sophia.
Tom, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1:02. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained. The Home Office said a series of operations took place across the country this week, with more activity due to be carried out in the coming weeks. Officials have not yet said how many people have been detained or where they were taken into custody. It comes ahead of the government's bid to get flights off the ground by July, after the Safety of Rwanda Act became law last week. Meanwhile, more than 1,500 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel in just over a week. GB News can reveal after several more boats were intercepted in UK waters today. A boatload of around 70 migrants were taken to Dover Harbour by lifeboat in the early hours this morning. So far today, around 250 people have been taken to the Border Force Migrant Processing Centre in Dover. Official figures for yesterday reveal that 268 migrants arrived in the UK on 5 small boats. In other news, a 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were injured at a school in Sheffield. Officers were called to Burley Community College just before 9 o'clock this morning after reports of an incident involving a sharp object. A child was assaulted and 2 adults suffered minor injuries. The suspect remains in police custody. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan said she was disturbed to hear about the incident. The Prime Minister has said the death of a 14-year-old boy in the Hainault stabbing attack was absolutely heartbreaking. Rishi Sunak also paid tribute to the highest standards of public service shown by police in dealing with the incident. It comes after Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley said a female police officer came close to losing her hand. Video has emerged showing the moment police arrested the man wielding a sword. The 36-year-old has been arrested on suspicion of murder and is now in hospital, police saying they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, paid tribute to the boy and the emergency services.
Such violence has no place on our streets. It's absolutely heartbreaking that a teenage boy has died, and I can't imagine what his family are going through. And we send them our heartfelt condolences and offer our very best wishes to all those injured. And I'd just like to reiterate my thanks to the police and other emergency first responders for embodying the highest standards of public service under such awful circumstances.
Violent clashes have erupted on the campus of the University of California in Los Angeles. It's between pro-Palestinian protesters and a group of counter-demonstrators. Riot police have had to break up crowds of people wielding sticks to attack wooden boards being held up as a makeshift barricade to protect pro-Palestinian protesters. Overnight, New York City police arrested dozens of pro-Palestinian demonstrators occupying an academic building on Columbia University campus, and that's in New York. House prices fell for the second month in a row in April as potential buyers continue to face pressure on affordability. The UK's biggest building society said that UK house prices were down by 0.4% compared with the previous month. Nationwide said the average house price now sits some 4% below the peak in the summer of 2022, costing on average £261,962. Nationwide's chief economist, Robert Gardner, said the slowdown likely reflects ongoing affordability pressures. And a new prostate cancer screening initiative is being called a pivotal moment that could save thousands of lives. The Transform project aims to reduce deaths from the disease by 40%, with doctors collating data to help make treatments more effective. Prostate cancer kills 12,000 men in Britain each year. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 1. Now, our top story today, the 14-year-old boy killed in a sword attack in London yesterday attended the same school as one of the victims in last year's Nottingham stabbings, Grace O'Malley-Kumar.
Quite incredible. Now, yesterday's attack also injured 2 police officers, resulting in a 36-year-old suspect being arrested on suspicion of murder.
But now, in shocking developments today, it's also been confirmed that 2 adults and a child have been taken to hospital following another stabbing incident at a school in Sheffield.
Well, let's go straight live to the scene now where our reporter Anna Riley is waiting. Anna, what do we know about what happened at this school?
Yes, well, we're here at Burley Academy in Sheffield, about 5 miles out of the city centre. It's a school for 11 to 16-year-olds with about 1,095 pupils attending this school. We know that South Yorkshire Police were called at 10 to 9 this morning here to the school after reports of an incident involving a sharp object at the school. We know that a child was assaulted and 2 adults suffered minor injuries in the incident here, and we know that a 17-year-old boy is still being questioned by police in custody at the moment on suspicion of attempted murder. The school is set in a residential area, a fairly quiet area, and the school went into lockdown after what happened. Understandably, parents were here at the school worried, waiting to pick their children up. Children at the school also worried and concerned, frightened about what was happening. We know that 3 people, as I say, were treated for minor injuries after the incident, and the school is now currently closed with police and CSI here at the scene as part of their investigation. We know that a spokesperson for the Burley Academy has said that they went into lockdown and that the safety of students and staff is paramount, that all students and staff are safe, and they praise staff for the professionalism and the students for the way that they responded. We know from the police as well, they've said that they'll remain at the scene throughout the day to provide assurances to the school and the local community, and will provide further updates as they can. Gillian Keegan as well, the Education Secretary, has spoken out on social media. She said she's disturbed to hear about the incident here at Burley Academy where a teenager is arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, and they say they're in touch with the school and that her thoughts are with those injured and all the school community affected by this frightening situation. A school leaders union has also described the incident here as shocking. Paul Whiteman, the General Secretary of the NHAT School Leaders Union, saying the reports coming out of Sheffield are shocking and very upsetting. Our thoughts are with everybody in the Burley school community. Now, we'll be here on the scene all afternoon, and as we get more updates, we will bring them.
Anna Riley, thank you very much for bringing us that live from Sheffield. Really concerning developments. It seems to be a national crisis, really, this country is, when it comes to knife attacks.
Yes, last week we were reporting a school in Wales where there was a stabbing. Yesterday, of course, reporting that a machete-wielding man struck and stabbed a teenager to death. It does seem as though this is getting rather out of control in this country. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, did address the attack at this school in Sheffield and yesterday's stabbing in North East London during PMQs earlier this afternoon.
Violence has no place on our streets. It's absolutely heartbreaking that a teenage boy has died, and I can't imagine what his family are going through, and we send them our heartfelt condolences and offer our very best wishes to all those injured. And I'd just like to reiterate my thanks to the police and other emergency first responders for embodying the highest standards of public service under such awful circumstances. And I know that our thoughts are also with those injured this morning in an attack at a school in Sheffield.
Well, that was the Prime Minister speaking around an hour ago. We're now joined by the Conservative Member of Parliament, Heather Wheeler. And Heather, let's just start with this seeming sort of spate of stabbings. What's going wrong?
What I find quite interesting is the ages of the people involved. The school, particularly today, so it's 11 to 16, and the person involved is a 17-year-old. So it looks like there's a close connection there. The event yesterday, the police have said that they're waiting to interview him because he's not able to be interviewed yet. So I don't know, drugs maybe? I don't know. It's really, really difficult. Each time something different seems to be the root cause of it. But either way, the laws that we've introduced about the definition of a knife, the size of a knife, being illegal to carry it, having a 3-year sentence if you are carrying a knife illegally, all these things need to be made absolutely clear. And I hope in schools that part of their conversations, when they have conversations with very upset children, that, you know, absolutely, please do not carry knives. Please do not carry knives.
Well, elsewhere, we'll move on from this just now while we've got you, because the Rwanda scheme is very much back in the news today. The government have been claiming a victory because the first failed asylum seeker has gone off to Rwanda. But it's a little more complicated than it seems, though, isn't it? Or at least there's more than meets the eye. Because this guy, he came from an African nation. He had his asylum claim rejected, and then he voluntarily accepted £3,000 to go to Rwanda. So we just bribed him and it worked.
There has been a return scheme for many, many years. It used to be a particular thing with Eastern Europeans that weren't sort of permanently settled in the UK, and that has worked very well. Part of the deal with Albania is that we can have this very good, seamless move back, and I have absolutely no problem if the Rwanda Asylum Centre is prepared to take these people, which they are, and somebody's going to start a new life back there, then that's fine by me.
I suppose the £3,000 to some people seems quite an egregious sum to give someone who's been rejected asylum in the UK.
And Tom, it's not just that. Hearing that it's we're also going to be subsidising up to 5 years of housing and employment support. We're very much setting him up for a good life in Rwanda.
Well, Rwanda is a beautiful place, and I'm sure he'll have a lovely life. I've visited and I've had a look and seen different schemes out there myself. So I don't think anybody needs to give me £3,000 to go out there, but that's beside the point. We have a real big issue in our country. There are many, many parts of the country that are not comfortable having inward immigration. And if this is part of, whether it's our aid money or whatever, helping those countries and helping people set themselves back up over there, then that is absolutely fine. Because if you can help with businesses and jobs and employment and the economy in the area, then that is what our aid money ought to be doing, in my opinion.
Now, of course, this is one case of voluntary repatriation. It happens to be the first case of someone going to Rwanda. But what we've learnt this lunchtime is now there is detention going on. I wonder if we've got some pictures that we can show for those watching on television here. Some of the first pictures of detention of those who have arrived in the country illegally. My understanding is these are people who haven't necessarily been told that their asylum application has been approved or otherwise, because the Rwanda scheme is simply about those who have crossed the channel illegally. Their case won't be heard, and they'll be sent to Rwanda.
Yeah, it's for anybody that's arrived here illegally. The focus happens to be on the boats, but unfortunately still people are coming through in lorries and things like that. Far fewer than there ever used to be, because, you know, you clamp down here and then something else happens there, doesn't it? But it's very much, you know, the Prime Minister said, we will get flights going. We had another week's delay with the goings-on in the Lords, another 100-plus Labour Lords voting against it. I mean, just outrageous. So anyway, we've got there. We've got the bill through.
Heather, though, I mean, these are the unlucky ones, though, aren't they? I mean, we were all reading yesterday how thousands of migrants who were flagged to be deported on this scheme are just lost to the system. They're not checking in anymore. Presumably, they've taken their accommodation cash and gone for a runner.
Well, I don't think that would be a good characterisation of the situation at all. So the reporting in depots, offices around the country are working very well. I mean, they're in really interesting places. I mean, the one over in Loughborough used to be a job centre. I mean, these are very unusual government buildings that are now being repurposed. And that's good. You know, we're, to use a dreadful phrase again, thinking outside the box. That's what we've got to do. The people have made it quite clear in this country that they want to see this ending. We have said we will get it done. We've finally got the law through against the teeth of opposition from Labour, and now we've got one gone. OK, that's fine. It was a voluntary arrangement, but this is it. You know, it's all about deterrent, and it will work.
Well, we shall see.
We will.
I suppose the question mark will be if a few flights will actually stop those more coming across. The investment initially could be worth it in the long run, although we'll have to wait and see if that really does take place. Heather Wheeler, thank you so much for coming in and talking through those topics with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, across the Atlantic, chaos has broken out at UCLA, that's a university in Los Angeles, California. Local police are trying to restore order at the US college, donning riot gear.
Yes, violent clashes erupted on Wednesday on the campus between pro-Palestinian protesters and a group of counter-demonstrators. This follows similar clashes at Columbia University in New York City.
Yes, it does seem that things are getting rather out of control over in the States. How many different colleges have seen this kind of disturbance? But anyway, let's speak to the chair of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson, who is in New York for us. Greg, I'm not sure what time it is over there, but thank you very much for speaking to us. Alarming footage from these campuses. I mean, was it necessary for the riot police to storm these barricades?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually a good question, but in this case, absolutely necessary. They let it go on for way too long at Columbia here in New York City. And of course, yesterday, the violence started, or last night, the violence started at UCLA in Westwood, part of Los Angeles, beautiful campus, and they let it go on for 3.5 hours before they called in the police. So there was, you know, the police that were on hand, the university police, completely abdicated and just left the scene. And so, yeah, unfortunately, riot police were absolutely necessary. At Columbia, they basically took over a building called Hamilton Hall and occupied it, and it demanded, you know, not only global intifada, but also demanded free food. So the irony was pretty outrageous. And unfortunately, on some of these elite campuses, the administrators have completely abandoned their responsibility to protect the students.
Now, Greg, I should say that what we're looking at now are live pictures in Los Angeles, in California, of this sort of tent city that has popped up, this sleep-in, sit-in demonstration, the middle of the night, of course, in California right now. But it looks like, despite the police action, this isn't going quietly into the night.
No, it's not. It's 5 a.m. in Los Angeles. It's 8 here in New York. I think it was a really rough night. I saw the riot police come in first to protect the students. You know, there were plenty of Jewish students who were counter-protesting, as you mentioned, and they needed protection, obviously. And now they have to round up, you know, the protesters. This is not peaceful protesting, I assure you. This is mob rule. And I think again, the administrators have really abdicated responsibility. And if you look, these are very elite institutions, but it's Columbia, Princeton, Northwestern, where I attended, and UCLA. on one hand. But then if you look at the other elite state universities in the red states, like University of Florida, University of Texas, completely shut down. There was absolutely no violence. They got ahead of it. They didn't allow these so-called protesters to set up their camps, and just made sure that all the students were safe, not just a select few of the mob.
Yes, Greg, I'm reading. I guess it depends who you're listening to and what their political biases are. But I'm reading that essentially the pro-Palestine protesters had set up their camps for a long time, and then it was pro-Israeli protesters that began to clash with them, presumably because they were fed up of seeing these types of protests on their campus. Is that right? Was it the pro-Israel protesters that started the violence?
Well, I don't know who started it. It sounds like a playground situation, but I know at UCLA, yes, there were Israeli counter-protesters. At Columbia, it was more of protecting Jewish students who couldn't get to the library, who could not get to their final exams. It's an interesting time of year on these university campuses. But I think what's clear also is these aren't just anti-Israel protesters, as sickening as that is. It's anti-Semitic, but they're anti-Western, they're anti-capitalist, and by all measures, they're very anti-social. So these are real, like, permanent protesters, the same crowd from the 2020 riots, and it's really they're trying to make their mark at these universities. Some have accepted that and let them go about, and others are more interested in protecting the students. And this is
many
also
of these,
really bad.
many of these protesters, of course, cite the First Amendment of the United States, the guaranteed constitutional right to free speech and their right to protest. I suppose it's one thing if they occupy a building. Very clearly, the university has a right to go in and turf people out of a building that they do not own. But when it's in a public space and they are simply protesting, perhaps they have a point here that they're using their First Amendment rights.
Yeah, I think they greatly exaggerate their rights here. Like free protest, peaceful protest is completely protected by the First Amendment, and you're seeing that at all of the universities, not just the elite ones where the violence has erupted. But it has to be controlled, and they can't permit tents to be set up or encampments to be set up. It only ends up with violence. We saw that in 2020 with the riots, where there was so much property destruction and so many lives were lost in the summer of 2020. And so that's something that I think a lot of the administrators are keeping in mind to make sure that doesn't happen again. They obviously failed that test at Columbia and UCLA and Northwestern. At Northwestern, by the way, there wasn't violence, but the university completely rolled over to the blackmail proposed by the pro-Hamas protesters at Northwestern, and they basically are providing, essentially blackmail, 2 faculty positions for Palestinians, 5 scholarships, and a student council that's going to oversee who the vendors are for the cafeteria vendors. I mean, it's really sickening what's happening at these elite schools. Yeah. But so I think it's going to be managed too little, too late, of course.
I mean, Greg, the world is certainly watching this quite incredible footage. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Really great to speak to you about what's going on there. Greg Swampson, who is chair of the Republicans overseas in New York for us.
Well, coming up, the Home Office has detained the first set of migrants for deportation to Rwanda, with flights set to take off at the beginning of July. We'll have all the very latest with our Home and Security editor after this.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
The International Monetary Fund has estimated that Russia will outgrow all advanced economies in 2024. This is in spite of all the sanctions the West has imposed on Russia, in spite of its removal of the SWIFT banking system, in spite of the fact that Germany has almost entirely weaned itself off Russian gas, and in spite of the 50,000 soldiers who have died and the endless resources it has poured into the Ukraine war. So, what are we missing here? Why is Russia going to grow more than the rest of us? Well, it's simple. Russia is willing to make use of its own energy resources to provide abundant supply to its citizens. Increased supply means lower prices, and cheap energy is inextricably linked to economic growth. But since 2008, the United States has grown at twice the rate of the United Kingdom. The big difference is that America has much lower energy prices, while the UK insists on masochistic green policies. But it's no surprise that the green fanatics in the Scottish government, where they know how to be fanatics, have had to backtrack on their flagship greenhouse gas reduction target. The SNP has committed to reducing Scotland's CO2 emissions by 75% by 2030. Now, the Climate Change Committee has reviewed its policy and advised that the absurd reduction target is out of reach.
Can we accept the CCC's recent re-articulation that this Parliament's interim 2030 target is out of reach? We must now act to chart a course to 2045.
It is time to recognise the truth that net zero by 2050 is unrealistic and unaffordable. It's time we rid ourselves of this foolish and costly idea that will simply make people cold and poor. We need to prioritise cheap energy for Britain's consumers and for companies, for industry, enabling economic growth that will benefit us all.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections, we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
Well, the breaking news this hour, the Home Office has now revealed that the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have now been detained.
In a series of operations that took place across the country this week. We're seeing them on our screens now. It all comes on the same day as new data revealed that the UK's record levels of immigration have started falling after tighter curbs resulted in a 25% drop in the number of visas issued this year.
Yes, well, for more details, we're joined now by GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. We're seeing the Home Office, Mark, releasing this footage of the first wave of migrants flagged for the Rwanda deportation scheme essentially being rounded up, put in the back of vans. Is this PR, or do we get the impression that there are a large number of people now who will be on those flights?
Well, I'm sure that opposition politicians might look at the timing of these raids coming just on the eve of the local elections and be a little bit suspicious. However, regardless of the timings, there is no doubt this is a very significant development after now more than 2 years since Boris Johnson, then Prime Minister, announced the Rwanda policy at Lyd Airport in Kent. I was there as he told us about this bold new policy that went nowhere fast. Finally, there is some movement. Of course, we got that bill last week brought into law now, paving the way for these flights, which the government tells us they're expecting now to take off between 9 and 11 weeks from now, those first flights. So in preparation for that, what you're seeing here are teams from immigration enforcement in operations that are countrywide, rounding up those that they have earmarked for deportation to Rwanda. And we were hearing, of course, just the other day that some 5,700 individuals had been pre-notified before it got caught up in the courts last year that they had been singled out for deportation to Rwanda. So those 5,700, or at least those that they can locate, they are now starting to round up.
Mark, it does seem like they're sort of shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted to some extent here. After all, we were just talking about this yesterday, how there were thousands of those 5,700, perhaps almost 3,000, who had disappeared. Could this be perhaps a Home Office response to that story?
Well, potentially, yes. And the Home Office, though, would dispute that anybody has disappeared. What they say is that they are confident that they will be able to locate all of those 5,700 individuals that have been earmarked for deportation. And that is likely that the sort of reporting stipulations for those different asylum seekers vary from one asylum seeker to the next. So while some in accommodation like hotels maybe have to report twice a month to Home Office reporting centres, there are others, they say, who are staying with family and friends who have looser arrangements. However, as I say, to get back to the point, they say that they are confident that they will be able to locate those that they have earmarked for deportation and be able to round them up and get them off to Rwanda sometime soon.
And Mark, this just very quickly, this decrease in the number of visas that have been handed out, the government claiming victory, is this down to policy changes or is this just one of those things?
Well, the government has always said that it wants to reduce the net migration figures into the country as well. Of course, a lot of that has actually been driven by student visas, and the number there is up again. It's very lucrative, of course, for universities across the country. But the difficulty, I think, with the students is that many of them are taking their families across. All those loopholes are being clamped down on. But that's good news, I think, to a small degree, that some of the visa the visa grants have come down.
Well, Mark White, thank you very much for talking us through those two big stories around migration in the United Kingdom. Very, very important stuff. But coming up, we're going to be discussing tomorrow's local elections, gauging the mood across the country. Before that, though, here are your lunchtime headlines.
It's 1:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. As you've been hearing, the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained. The Home Office said a series of operations took place across the country this week, with more activity due to be carried out in the coming weeks. Officials have not yet said how many people have been detained or where they were taken into custody. It comes ahead of the government's bid to get flights off the ground by July, after the Safety of Rwanda Act became law last week. Meanwhile, more than 1,500 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel in just over a week. GB News can reveal after several more boats were intercepted in UK waters today. A boatload of around 70 migrants were taken to Dover Harbour by lifeboat in the early hours this morning. So far today, around 250 people have been taken to the Border Force Migrant Processing Centre in Dover. Official figures for yesterday reveal that 268 migrants arrived in the UK on 5 small boats. In other news, the Prime Minister has said the death of a 14-year-old boy in the Hainault stabbing attack was absolutely heartbreaking. Rishi Sunak also paid tribute to the highest standards of public service shown by police in dealing with the incident. It comes after Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley said a female police officer came close to losing her hand. Video has emerged showing the moment police arrested the man wielding a sword. The 36-year-old has been arrested on suspicion of murder and is now in hospital, police saying they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, paid tribute to the boy and the emergency services. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were injured at a school in Sheffield. Officers were called to Burley Community College just before 9 o'clock this morning after reports of an incident involving a sharp object. A child was assaulted and 2 adults suffered minor injuries. The suspect remains in police custody. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan said she was disturbed to hear about the incident. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2485 and €1.1698. The price of gold is £1,840 and 8 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,144 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello again, it's time to take a look at the Met Office forecast for GB News. A lot of cloud today, a few showers around, but many places will be dry and some places will even experience a bit of warm sunshine. Low pressure is moving away. That's the low that brought some rain in the west during Tuesday. The rain's still there in places, but it's easing and actually many places are cheering up now. A much drier and brighter day for western parts compared with yesterday. Meanwhile, further east, more cloud compared with yesterday and some showery rain, especially for eastern Scotland, where it will remain cool, 11 to 12 Celsius. Elsewhere, further west and south, actually much warmer than it has been, up to 20 or 21 Celsius in parts of the southeast, especially where we'll get some cloud breaks. But we will see a thickening of the cloud and some outbreaks of heavy, potentially thundery rain arrive overnight, particularly after midnight, especially for central southern England, then into the southwest and South Wales. The risk of frequent lightning, heavy rain and hail in places. Those thunderstorms will be hit and miss, but we'll see an area of fairly heavy rain across South Wales and southwest England as we begin Thursday. Thundery showers in 1 or 2 places elsewhere. Otherwise, it's drier further north and increasingly sunny for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, eastern Scotland and eastern England, seeing a lot of low cloud and feeling cool here, but much warmer elsewhere, up to 23 Celsius in East Anglia.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Cheshire firstly in this update on the southbound M6 around the Croft interchange. That's the turn off of the M62, so junction 21A slow going and earlier obstructions being cleared, but we're still seeing a legacy of congestion. Southbound M53 Ellesmere Port to Little Stanley, that's junction 9 to 10. There's a breakdown blocking a lane. Queues for the M25, the inside lane shed both sides of the carriageway. That's between Sevenoaks at junction 5 and the Clackett lane services. It's all due to those ongoing emergency repairs, of course. And then finally to Hampshire, the southbound side of the M3, just around the turn off of Basingstoke there at junction 6. There's been a collision inside the last half an hour. Delays are building and there's a lane closure in place. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Britain is just coming up to 20 to 2. Well, let's get more on our top story this hour. The tragic news that the 14-year-old boy killed in a sword attack in London yesterday attended the very same school as one of the victims of last year's Nottingham stabbings, Grace O'Malley Kumar.
Yes, quite incredible. Let's go live to the scene now, where our correspondent Catherine Forster is. Catherine, tell us more about this. It seems the most crazy a coincidence.
Yes, good afternoon, Tom and Emily. What are the odds? But yes, indeed, the 14-year-old boy who tragically lost his life yesterday, early morning here in Hainault, went to Bancroft's school. It's an independent school, the same school as Grace O'Malley Kumar, who lost her life stabbed to death last year while defending her friend Barnaby Webber. Her parents have offered their condolences, said that hardly anybody knows what it is to lose a child in this way, and that it is, absolutely unspeakable. We still don't know the identity of the boy, of course, but we do know that his mother was a science teacher at the Holy Family Catholic School in Waltham Forest. A note was sent to parents yesterday saying that Mrs. Angerin's son had been taken from this life suddenly on his way to school. Absolutely unimaginable. We've also heard more details today from St Mark Rowley, the Met Police Commissioner, about the 2 police officers who are in hospital with serious injuries. The male police officer has bad injuries to his hands, but the female police officer, basically, they said that a surgeon had spent many, many hours pretty much putting her arm back together, and that it had come close potentially to her losing her hand, but he believed that with enough physio and time, she would be able to make a good recovery. So some really horrific details emerging. I should say as well, I was here yesterday afternoon, and I'm struck getting here how little has changed. Yes, it is calmer, but the cordon remains in place. They're literally only letting in and out people who actually live in these streets. Police officers still combing the area. The road is still blocked. A very heavy police presence. Locals sad and shocked, and flowers now starting to appear. It's such an ordinary suburban part of northeast London, much the same as millions of us leave, to go to work or to go to school every morning.
Catherine, thank you so much for bringing us that news. It has been a really shocking tale that boy was just on his way to school.
Yeah, truly shocking. And hearing about that police officer and her injuries, shocking as well. Essentially piecing her arm back together, it sounds like. Could have been an amputation, but it sounds as though she may well make a recovery.
Well, we'll move on now, because the people of Blackpool South will head to the polls tomorrow after the resignation of their former MP triggered a by-election.
Yes, often recognised as one of the most deprived areas of the country, voters in this constituency will be demanding real and meaningful change from whichever candidate is successful.
To what extent an MP can actually deliver, one MP delivering change?
I imagine a lot of them have given up.
Well, our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper paid a visit to the area to find out more.
The world-famous Blackpool Promenade. Once upon a time, people flocked from all over the globe to visit this iconic seaside resort. But in recent years, the town has gained a rather different reputation. In fact, the most recent government figures place 8 of the 10 most deprived neighbourhoods in the country here in Blackpool.
Have you enjoyed your stay?
The Royal Boston Hotel first opened its doors back in 1934. Since then, the promenade has completely changed, and not necessarily for the better.
Blackpool can be beautiful, it can be wonderful, but it also can look very run down when you drive up and down the promenade. So it needs investment, and I think there's people willing to invest, but it's just unlocking that key around how we can do that and how we can actually change those buildings and that structure.
Tomorrow, the people of Blackpool South will head to the polls to choose their new MP. For John, the successful candidate needs to secure the town's future by making decisions now.
A huge part of what the MP is going to need to do is to create that job and those opportunities and work with local businesses to create that opportunity. Because we see, and I see, a huge amount of talent leaving Blackpool. They're the ambassadors for the town, they're the future of Blackpool.
Here at the heart of Blackpool's tourist economy, its tower still stands, its illuminations still shine.
And yet now, for its people, they feel it's time for change.
Blackpool South's about to get a new MP. What do you want them to do for Blackpool?
To invest more money in the mental health services around Blackpool, because there isn't much to offer for young people.
They need to invest more money in the people of Blackpool rather than the tourist areas.
Make it safer, make it a better community, especially with the cost of living crisis.
To do more for Blackpool residents, more for the homeless, which they don't actually do. They place them into hotels, leave them for 3 months, and if they don't find a place within them 3 months, they're moved. But I'm one of them people.
I think it's quite sad, actually.
Yes.
It's very sad, because Blackpool was massive.
A once glittering tourist trap, the Blackpool of today seems to have lost some of its sparkle. And for its local people, they can only hope their new MP can restore the town to happier days. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
It's really sad looking at the front there. Lots of boarded up shops. As we said, it's one of the most deprived areas in the country. Will a change of MP, will a change of politician be able to make it prosperous again?
Although there's a lovely new sort of paving outside, just in front of Blackpool Tower, with sort of all sort of classic comedy quotes drawn in. It looks very, very new. I was there last year or the year before, and just the seafront. I mean, a nice day, and it's a lovely part of the world.
Make Blackpool great again.
Well, the full list of candidates standing in the Blackpool South by-election are Stephen Black, he's an independent, Mark Butcher for Reform UK, Andrew Cregan, Lib Dems, Howling Lord Hope, the official monster-raving loony party, David Jones from the Conservatives, Kim Knight, the Alliance for Freedom and Democracy,
and Damon Sharp, New Open Non-Political Organised Leadership Party. Wow. Ben Thomas, Green Party. Chris Webb, Labour. There you go. There you go. Those are the candidates for Blackpool South.
And we're not going to cast any opinion on any of those parties or how ridiculous their names are.
No,
well, coming
absolutely
up...
not. Never.
Wouldn't dream of it.
Not till after the election, anyway.
No. Well, coming up, a retired teacher who refused to pay an English-only parking fine in Wales could face a £10,000 legal bill. £10,000!
We're talking about the language here. So are English-only parking charge notices not good enough? Is this against the Welsh?
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations. Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where. We need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK, and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. They could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would
they would
destroy
be
our
now.
economy.
Well, they would be now, but, you know, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, you know, I grew up thinking that everybody had, you know, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a Primus day and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles.
Absolutely.
They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead at actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 10 minutes to 2. Now, you've been writing in with lots of views about all of the topics we've been talking about today.
You have indeed. Sean says, we'd love to take £3,000 and free flights with help for 5 years to settle in Rwanda.
Would you? Would you like...
That's what Sean says.
You'd
anyway.
have to stay there. Like, you wouldn't be able to come back.
Sean says, we made a big mistake just before Brexit by returning to the UK from Spain after 21 years. Any help would be appreciated. Britain is a joke now. So, Sean, you got yourself into a bit of a pickle. So you were having a lovely life in Spain. You moved back to the UK. Now you don't have the freedom of movement, presumably, and you didn't sign up for settled status in Spain. And now you'd prefer to be in Rwanda. I think you must be a sun worshipper.
I mean, the Spanish unemployment rate is so much higher than the British unemployment rate.
Sean might be retired.
We talk about low growth in the UK. I mean, the low growth in Spain is a different planet.
Sean might be retired. He might be living it up.
I mean, sure, but he'd be living it up in a much, much poorer country. I mean, my goodness.
Well, you know, the sun does shine in Spain.
It's true.
But obviously, I want everyone to stay here.
But we'll get to more of your views in a little bit, because a retired Welsh teacher who refused to pay a parking fine that was written only in English could face a £10,000 legal bill.
Yeah, this is quite a debacle, really. The language campaigner, Tony, I don't want to butcher this, Schiavone, was issued with a £70 penalty for parking without paying in 2020.
He said that he's happy to pay the penalty notice if only the parking company translated it into Welsh.
Really? But One Parking Solution won an appeal in January to reintroduce the case and has since paid over £10,000, goodness me, in legal fees.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, you know, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? You know, English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, you know, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him to go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling him that. You know, at least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And, so, you know,
Gareth,
speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh government are trying to, you know, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, you know, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm
you know
not a
what?
frat.
If I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham or if you come from somewhere that's much more Welsh-speaking, because there's lots of
It would be terribly sad, though, if they lost the language.
You're being disingenuous now, because there's a lot of Welsh-speaking people in Wrexham. You know, we've got Wrexham Football Club flying now. We've got the two Hollywood superstars learning Welsh, so, you know, you might have to eat your words.
Thanks so much, Gareth. Gareth, great to speak to you. Great to speak to you. Great to speak to you. Sorry, we've run out of time this hour, but we're going to be back very soon indeed. We've got lots to talk about, including the government claiming victory. They're detaining...
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's time to take a look at the Met Office forecast for GB News. A lot of cloud today, a few showers around, but many places will be dry and some places will even experience a bit of warm sunshine. Low pressure is moving away. That's the low that brought some rain in the west during Tuesday. The rain's still there in places, but it's easing, and actually many places are cheering up now. A much drier and brighter day for western parts compared with yesterday. Meanwhile, further east, more cloud compared with yesterday and some showery rain, especially for eastern Scotland, where it will remain cool, 11 to 12 Celsius. Elsewhere, further west and south, actually much warmer than it has been, up to 20 or 21 Celsius in parts of the southeast, especially where we'll get some cloud breaks. But we will see a thickening of the cloud and some outbreaks of heavy, potentially thundery rain arrive overnight, particularly after midnight, especially for central southern England, then into the southwest and South Wales. The risk of frequent lightning, heavy rain and hail in places. Those thunderstorms will be hit and miss, but we'll see an area of fairly heavy rain across South Wales and southwest England as we begin Thursday. Thundery showers in one or two places elsewhere. Otherwise, it's drier further north and increasingly sunny for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, eastern Scotland and eastern England, seeing a lot of low cloud and feeling cool here, but much warmer elsewhere, up to 23 Celsius in East Anglia.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've blown the budget by giving you the chance to win a totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
we'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 1st of May. Coming up on today's show.
The Home Office has today revealed that the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained in a series of operations that took place across the country this week.
Across the Atlantic, violence erupts as riot police storm Columbia University and police respond to violent clashes at UCLA in California. Dozens of pro-Palestine activists have been arrested.
And another stabbing has taken place, this time at a school in Sheffield. It follows more shocking developments from yesterday's attack in London, which saw a 14-year-old boy lose his life.
And did the slave trade really make Britain rich? Kemi Badenoch has said colonialism played only a minor role in Britain's wealth, and the empire might well have cost more than it actually made in cash. Is she right? We'll host a fiery debate.
Is she right? Because we're often told that the wealth of this country was built on the backs of the slave trade. But could it be a little more complicated than that, Tom?
Could it be precisely the opposite of that? Could it be the fact that actually the United Kingdom abolished the slave trade before any other country, any other major country in the world actually abolished the slave trade? And also the fact that the United Kingdom had the largest, most expansive empire the world has ever seen, did that come before or after the Industrial Revolution? It came after. So the extent of the empire, you could very well make the argument that the empire was a consequence of industrialisation, a consequence of Britain's wealth, rather than the cause of that wealth.
Yes. Was it our institutions, relatively free markets, free trade, liberal institutions? These are the sorts of things that Kemi Badenoch was talking about. Did the empire actually end up losing us money? Well, and so, therefore, that was one of the reasons why we scrapped it.
This is all based on a new book that Dr. Christian Niemitz of the Institute of Economic Affairs has written, and it looks at the history of Britain. Britain actually had slightly higher taxes compared to other major countries in the 19th century as a result of the empire, because the empire cost a lot to run.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily creating loads and loads of cash. And then you look at other countries, for example, countries that didn't have overseas empires, like Germany. Germany caught up with the United Kingdom and actually grew faster than the UK in the late 1800s. Could that be because it wasn't held back by having interests overseas and expensive armies to keep up?
Well, history buffs at home, let us know what your perspective is. Is this the right question to ask? Did the slave trade make Britain rich, or is it the other way round, actually? Let's get your headlines with Sophia. I don't know if we're on air right now.
We could well be on air. And if we are, it's delightful to have your company. This is Good Afternoon Britain, and we'll be getting right back to the programme that you're expecting as soon as we can. But in the meantime, Emily, I think one of the most interesting things about the last hour of discussion was, frankly, this recurring sense of a crime wave in the UK, because there is some data that does say, particularly in major cities, it does feel like crime is getting worse.
Yes, absolutely. And anecdotally, at least, I know that many people living in the capital in London, in particular, are feeling less and less safe. Many people having their phones ripped out of their hands while they're crossing a road. A friend of mine, on her way to work in central London, 8 a.m. in the morning, someone comes past on one of these e-bikes, just grabs her phone out of her hand in broad daylight, and she's phoneless.
And then we talk about knife crime. In London, it's up over 20%. But the interesting stat, perhaps, is that in the rest of the country, it's actually down. But does it really feel like that? Big questions to answer, but we'll be getting to those questions and so many more after your afternoon headlines.
Thanks, Tom. From the GB Newsroom at 2:04, I'm Sophia Wensler. Your top story: the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained. The Home Office said a series of operations took place across the country this week, with more activity due to be carried out in the coming weeks. Officials have not yet said how many people have been detained or where they will be taken to. It comes ahead of the government's bid to get flights off the ground by July, after the Safety of Rwanda Act became law last week. Meanwhile, more than 1,500 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel in just over a week. GB News can reveal after several more boats were intercepted in UK waters today. A boatload of around 70 migrants were taken to Dover Harbour by lifeboats in the early hours this morning. So far today, around 250 people have been taken to the Border Force Migrant Processing Centre in Dover. Official figures for yesterday reveal 268 migrants arrived in the UK on 5 small boats. In other news, a 17-year-old boy has been arrested for attempted murder after 3 people were injured at a school in Sheffield. Officers were called to Burley Community College just before 9 o'clock this morning. It's after reports of an incident involving a sharp object. A child was assaulted and 2 adults suffered minor injuries. The suspect remains in police custody. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan said she was disturbed to hear about the incident. The Prime Minister has said the death of a 14-year-old boy in the Hainault stabbing attack was absolutely heartbreaking. Rishi Sunak also paid tribute to the highest standards of public service shown by police in dealing with the incident. Video has emerged showing the moment police arrested the man wielding a sword. The 36-year-old has been arrested on suspicion of murder and is now in hospital, police saying they've been unable to interview him due to his condition. Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley says a female police officer came close to losing her hand.
We were on the ground in 12 minutes and he was detained after 22 minutes. Obviously, some of the first contacts led to officers being very severely injured. I went to the hospital yesterday and to see the officers and their families. I saw the inspector whose hand's badly damaged, and I was talking to the family and colleagues of the officer, woman officer who's really badly damaged arm, really seriously damaged, and the surgeon spent sort of many hours sort of basically putting her arm back together.
Police have arrested 3 people during a pro-Palestinian protest outside a government building in central London. Hundreds of demonstrators held a rally outside the Department of Business and Trade. Organisers said workers and trade unionists demonstrated also held protests outside BAE Systems sites with the aim of showing solidarity with Palestinian workers. And violent clashes have erupted on the campus of the University of California in Los Angeles. It's between pro-Palestinian protesters and a group of counter-demonstrators. Riot police have had to break up crowds of people wielding sticks to attack wooden boards being held up as a makeshift barricade to protect the pro-Palestinian protesters. Overnight, New York City police also arrested dozens of pro-Palestinian demonstrators occupying an academic building on Columbia University in New York. House prices fell for the second month in a row in April as potential buyers continue to face pressure on affordability. The UK's biggest building society said that UK house prices were down 0.4% compared with the previous month. Nationwide said the average house price now sits some 4% below the peak in the summer of 2022, costing on average £261,962. Nationwide's chief economist, Robert Gardner, said the slowdown likely reflects ongoing affordability pressures. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 2. Now, the Home Office today has revealed that the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained in a series of operations that took place across the country this week.
Well, we're joined now by the human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan to discuss this. Shoaib, lots of people said this scheme was impossible, it would never be a success, we wouldn't see any flights. The government now are taking action, aren't they? They're actually rounding up people on their list for deportation. Surely, these people will actually end up on flights.
Yeah. Well, a few things to say. But firstly, the way you started off the question about, so many people said it wouldn't be a success. So I think just merely sending people wouldn't be a success anyway. The whole point is, a few months, while they're a few years later, are they safe? Are they thriving? Are they prospering? Well, that seems to be what the government keeps saying, that's what's going to happen to them. So that's when it would be a success. Are they even in Rwanda in a few months is the point. But secondly, even in terms of the deportation, even now, all we know is, the government has given us a general timeline, detention flights, 9 to 11 weeks. That's all we know, really. Who's the airline that's
hang on,
Shoaib,
I don't think the government are thinking about how prosperous these people are going to be in Rwanda. I'm not sure that's at the top of their priority list, to be honest, is it really? They just want
I agree with you.
them.
I don't think it is. I agree with you. I don't think it is, but that is what they keep saying. Kemi Badenoch, throughout the interviews today, kept promising they will prosper there. And those are the words they use. Those aren't my words. They keep saying, they will thrive in Rwanda. And that's the point. I don't think it is actually. I think those are just talking points that they say. I agree with you. I don't think it is actually top of their priority list. But having said that, even in terms of actually sending people, what we've seen, and in fact, they have been detaining people for 2 years. 2 years ago, obviously that last-minute injunction from the ECHR, people were in detention at the time. Dozens, if not hundreds of people due to be sent to Rwanda were in detention then. Obviously, they were all released then. And even now, legally speaking, one requirement for immigration detention, which this detention would be, is that the person's removal from the UK should be imminent or should be, reasonably foreseeable. So the point is, will courts or even Home Office caseworkers looking at whether these people now need to be released, will they consider that 9 to 11 weeks is imminent or reasonably foreseeable? So that's the point. We don't have to know how these people are going to go.
A lot of people will be listening to this and thinking, are you moving the goalposts here a bit? There were people who said at the start of this saga that no planes would ever take off, and now the test seems to be whether, when people get there, do they prosper and do they thrive? Surely, for the deterrent to work, if the deterrent is to work, all that needs to take place is that people who have arrived in this country illegally are removed to a safe third country. Once that starts happening in 9 weeks' time, surely the government can say, look, we promised something and we delivered it.
No, I don't think because that's the thing. That's not all they promised. Is that actually what we're saying? That's all they promised. What they promised is these people will be looked after. They'll have their asylum claims looked after properly. People who are already traumatized won't be re-traumatized by it. People won't be sent off to more dangerous countries. They promised all of these things, and that's the whole point. If it was just about, we promise we'll get them to Rwanda, then yeah, but that's the thing. Are we saying that's not what the government has been promising? They have promised all of those things. So I think just saying, a flight has taken off.
Sure, I'm not sure I've heard you make that point before. I've spoken to you a number of times, and previously you spoke about how it would be, it's just not going to work feasibly. It's not going to act as a deterrent, and we're not going to get the flights off to Rwanda. Now you're talking about whether the people who are deported to Rwanda are going to live prosperous lives, as if that's one of the things on their checklist. I'm not sure it is. I think their top priority is what the British public want, or a lot of the British public want at least, is for illegal migrants to not be in this country.
But that's the thing. like I said, you started your question of, is it a success? I think just a plane taking off is not a success. That's my point. If you're, the further point, but also, if a plane takes off, 3 months later, the UK Supreme Court or the ECHR, some other court says, the removal was unlawful. Those people have to be brought back. Would we still say the flight taking off in itself was a success? I don't think it is, and that's the whole point.
Well, Shoaib Khan, thank you so much for talking through that issue. I suppose we'll have to have you back once there have been a decent number of people arriving in Rwanda. Perhaps we can test if they are prospering and thriving. Shoaib Khan there, human rights lawyer, really appreciate your time this afternoon.
Although, to be honest, I'm not convinced that the flights will take off.
You're not?
Well, you know, lots of people have pointed out that there are still loopholes in this legislation that lawyers could be able to poke at and prevent people from being deported, but we shall see. You're more convinced, aren't you?
I'm very convinced.
You're convinced.
Do you want to bet?
No, absolutely not, I do not.
Sorry,
absolutely not. I don't want Piers Morgan, am I?
You don't want to fall into the Rishi Sunak trap. Or indeed, I think Keir Starmer's accepted a bet as well on
He
something.
did, a smaller bet, smaller bet.
I wouldn't be able to do a Rishi Sunak-sized bet, so I'd do it. I'd bet a pint.
Better pint.
OK, we're not going to do bets.
Well, we'll see. I guess the question is whether it will work as a deterrent, come what may.
But in more serious news now, the 14-year-old boy killed in a sword attack yesterday in London attended the very same school as one of the victims in last year's Nottingham stabbings, Grace O'Malley Kumar. Yesterday's attack also injured 2 police officers and resulted in a 36-year-old man being arrested in suspicion of murder.
And now, in shocking developments today, it's been confirmed that 2 adults and a child have been taken to hospital following another stabbing incident, this time at a school in Sheffield.
Well, let's go live to North East London, where our correspondent Catherine Forster joins us, and Sheffield, where our reporter Anna Riley is as well. Catherine, let's start with you, because we have learnt some more developments today about the tragic case of this teenage boy and his school.
Bancroft School. It's an independent school in Woodford Green, apologies. And it is, by some strange coincidence, the same school that Grace O'Malley Kumar attended before she went to Nottingham University. She, of course, was fatally stabbed last summer, returning home from a night out, trying to defend her friend Barnaby Webber. So both these people, young people, tragically have lost their lives to stabbing incidents that happened, both of them, in broad daylight. Now, back here in Hainault, again today, the community still reeling, just sadness and shock. Flowers being laid, one of them saying the community is broken. People just really can't believe what's happened here on the outskirts of North East London. And the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, speaking this morning about the bravery of the police officers. They come in for a lot of criticism, don't they? But we understand that the male police officer in hospital, major injuries to his hand, but also the woman had very, very serious injuries. Sir Mark Rowley said that basically she would have come close to losing her hand, but for the fact that the surgeon had spent many, many hours basically putting her arm back together. They were hopeful that in time they will both make a full recovery. We've also learnt that the boy who died, his mother was a science teacher at the Holy Family Catholic School in Waltham Forest. A memo was issued to parents saying that Mrs. Angerin's son had been taken from this life suddenly on his way to school yesterday. Really incredible state of affairs.
Thank you very much, Catherine Forster there in North East London. Now, Anna Riley, you're in Sheffield for us. Tell us what's happened at the school behind you.
Yes, I'm here at the Burley Academy in Sheffield, a secondary school for 11 to 16-year-olds with just over 1,000 pupils here. Police were called to the scene here at the secondary school at 10 to 9 this morning after reports of an incident involving a sharp object. fact. A 17-year-old boy was arrested. He remains in custody being questioned over attempted murder. A child was assaulted and 2 adults suffered minor injuries as a result of the incident. A police spokesperson for South Yorkshire Police have said that police will remain at the scene and here throughout the day to provide assurances to those at the school and the local community. And a spokesperson for the Burley Academy has also issued a statement saying that this morning the school went into lockdown as a result of the incident and that it has subsequently closed for the day. They say that the safety of students and staff is paramount and that all students and staff are safe, and they confirm that 3 people were treated for minor injuries at the scene, and they say no one was taken to hospital as a result. We know that Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, has been in contact with the school. She said she was disturbed to hear about the incident here at the Burley Academy, and we know that the leader of the largest education union in the UK has urged the government to do more to tackle youth violence and ensure that teachers and pupils are safe. Daniel Kabide, the General Secretary of the National Education Union, has said that their thoughts are with the staff, pupils and parents here at this academy in Sheffield and with the people that were injured. They say it's another shocking incident happening on school premises and that violence has no place in our schools and colleges and that everyone in school should feel and be safe. They say that the government needs to recognise the scale of the problem and adopt a public health approach to tackling youth violence, as did Scotland in the 90s, and that this should include urgent reinvesting in the youth services and centres that young people once relied upon. We'll be here throughout the afternoon and we'll provide more updates when we have them.
Anna Riley, thank you very much. And indeed, Catherine Forster before as well. 2 really tragic incidents and more information coming to light all the time.
Yes, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak did address the attack at the school in Sheffield and yesterday's stabbing in North East London during PMQs early this afternoon.
Violence has no place on our streets. It's absolutely heartbreaking that a teenage boy has died, and I can't imagine what his family are going through, and we send them our heartfelt condolences and offer our very best wishes to all those injured. And I'd just like to reiterate my thanks to the police and other emergency first responders for embodying the highest standards of public service under such awful circumstances. And I know that our thoughts are also with those injured this morning in an attack at a school in Sheffield.
Those were the words of Rishi Sunak earlier today in Prime Minister's Questions. But up next, Kemi Badenoch claims that slavery did not play a major role in Britain's historic wealth. Does she have a point? Or is it masking the reality of history? We're going to have more on that in just a moment. A bit of a fiery debate's coming.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the quaint Derbyshire village of Sudbury, there's a storm brewing between the local football club and the National Trust. This grass field might seem unremarkable, but for hundreds of years it's been part of the Sudbury Hall estate, playing host to the village football and cricket matches. Now the National Trust are planning to put an end to that tradition in the name of biodiversity, with plans for trees and plants where the football club play. Some worry it breaks a memorandum of wishes from the late Lord Vernon, whose family have lived here since 1660. Manager of Sudbury FC Tom Crutchley says he's upset at the decision.
Naturally disappointed. We've been here, this is our 9th year. We've put a lot of effort into here to keep playing, to maintain it. I'm from the village originally, so personally it was, it is very upsetting.
MP for Derbyshire Dales Sarah Dines says the National Trust aren't respecting the history of the site.
I feel they're trampling over the wishes of historic owners who gave up this wonderful site for the nation. And for over 100 years, people have played football and cricket here. It's incredibly sad. incredibly sad. And it's against the wishes of a lot of people locally who've written to me from the village.
Sudbury Hall lives under the branding of the Children's Country House, a decision which Dines says is disrespectful to the history of the estate.
I mean, this is fake to make it into a children's theme park. It's almost a reimagining, and in fact, that's the very words it says on their website. The house is reopened, it's been reimagined. I don't want our heritage to be reimagined. I think the National Trust has been captured by people who have different ideas than most people in this country.
Whilst the public will still be able to roam these historic grounds, the village feels like a legacy is being snatched away. Jack Carson, GB News, Sudbury.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 2. Now, Kemi Badenoch, the Trade Secretary, has backed a report by the Institute of Economic Affairs. This report says that slavery had a very minor role to play in Britain's overall wealth.
Yes, which is quite a controversial claim to make. Now, the Business and Trade Secretary praised the report for its counterweight to simplistic narratives that exaggerate the significance of empire and slavery to Britain's economic development.
Well, the report also says that slavery and colonialism could have contributed to making Britain poorer. But has the significance been played down by the report? Let's debate the facts now. The communications officer at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim, joins us, and Ken Hines, who's an anti-racism activist, is also here. Reem, it's your organisation's report. What exactly is it saying?
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Tom. And absolutely, it's talking about the fact that the report effectively says colonialism and imperialism and the British Empire had a very minuscule impact on Britain's economic wealth. Now, we look at the way in which the Black Lives Matter organisation and a couple of other anti-racism organisations have effectively tried to misconstrue history and say that actually this isn't the case, that colonialism is the reason why the West is rich, that the Industrial Revolution wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for colonialism, and that just simply isn't the case. So my colleague Christian Niemitz looked at the economics of the British Empire and actually found that it's either the fact that the British Empire and colonialism itself had either little impact on the economy or even was detriment to it. The cost of acquisition and the cost of actually defending the empire was much, much higher than any of the gains that were made.
Ken, slavery didn't make us rich.
I believe that she's delusionary. At the height of the British Empire, they had 412 million people under their control. They also controlled 23% of the landmass of the world. So to me, that wasn't given by some sort of treaty. That was done through being war, through violating each of those countries. Even as 1917, 1918, they also controlled certain part of Germany after the First World War. So
yes,
my thing is simply this.
Sounds expensive.
Yeah.
Ken, the point is that controlling all of that land might well have cost more money than it delivered.
That's exactly the point, right? The fact of the matter is the British Empire itself was, and again, colonialism is a bad thing. It's not moral. It's immoral to take over countries without their consent and effectively ruin their institutions. Now, one thing that my colleague does say in the book is that colonialism did hurt the colonised countries. Those countries were unable to develop their institutions, which effectively make those countries economically viable. But the reason why Britain and other Western countries are wealthy is not because of empire. It's actually primarily due to the fact that they opened up their markets to free trade. The point is that you don't have to have an empire in order to trade with one another. You can do so by having an open trade policy.
My comeback on that is simple, that we see back in Africa how Africa remains poor, how Africa still has to pay its debts back to Britain, and in doing so, they are paying out more back to Britain than spending on their own people. And they've been wondering why people are taking these routes to come immigrate to England and put themselves in some danger to get here. My thing is simply this.
What money is Africa giving to Britain?
Quite clearly, they're still paying back Britain a large part of their gross domestic
I mean, that's just not true.
Each year. Yes, they are. And I will also say that the simple fact that we got these so-called dodgy leaders in some African countries that take not millions but take billions out of the country.
So Ken, you're absolutely right. There are huge amounts of corruption in many African countries, but I think it's really wrong to mischaracterise an entire continent as one homogenous group of people in which there is huge amounts of corruption across the board. I'm from 2 North African countries, and they've been able to develop at very different rates in comparison to other more sub-Saharan African countries, purely due to the fact that they've opened up their economies. Now, of course, corruption and effectively expropriating a lot of that wealth that we see from many of these corrupt governments, that does hinder growth. But that's not to say that slavery or the British Empire had anything to do with it. The reason why those countries are poor is because they've not opened up to market economies.
Okay, let's let Ken come back. Yeah.
I would hit back at that and saying the sort of people that are in the leaders in these corrupt countries are done with the nod of Britain. Now, if Britain don't like a leader in Africa, what they will do, they will finance the opposition and create problems within that country, create wars in that country. It's still happening today. And so when you're saying that they're opening their markets, they're opening themselves up for market forces, it's a lie. It's always done to their advantage.
Ken, haven't you just contradicted yourself there? Initially, you were saying all of these African countries are paying the UK lots of money, although you haven't set out a case where that's actually happening. And now you're saying the UK is actually giving lots of money to keep tin pot dictatorships up and running.
I'm saying at the end of the day, they're still paying Britain part of their GDP.
Why are they paying Britain?
A large amount of their GDP, right, comes out. And even like a place like Nigeria, which has got huge resources of oil, but the deal that they've put together to get the oil to the world market is at the disadvantage of the Nigerian
Again, that's
people.
I'm sorry, but that's just simply not true. Many of these countries in Africa that have actually they're able to extract a lot of those natural resources, that acts as a net benefit to those countries. I think it's really dangerous that we're starting to propagate these kind of narratives that capitalism or that the West... No, sorry, let me finish. Let me finish. We're propagating these kind of narratives that the West was built off the backs of slaves or off the backs of the British Empire. Now, again, the British Empire and empire itself makes no economic sense. Actually having to expropriate those countries, having to defend them, having to acquisition itself is incredibly expensive. The point is, the West was built on the principle of free trade.
OK, well, we're going to have to leave it there. Great debate. Really good to speak to you, Ken Hinds. Sorry we had to cut that a little bit short, but Reem Ibrahim as well from the Institute of Economic Affairs, because live to New York, there is a press conference on those college protests.
To remove those who have turned the peaceful protest into a place where anti-Semitism and anti-Israel attitudes were pervasive. Approximately 300 people were arrested at Columbia and City College. We are processing the arrests to distinguish between who were actual students and who were not supposed to be on the ground. And we pointed out yesterday these external actors with a history of escalating situations and trying to create chaos, not to peacefully protest, but create chaos. If you were at City College and you saw the bottles, the garbage cans, the other items that were thrown at police officers, those police officers showed a great level of discipline to not allow this to evolve to an out-of-control situation. As we pointed out yesterday, they are attempting to disrupt our city, and we are not going to permit it to happen. And we're proud to say they have been removed from the campus. The NYPD's precision policing ensured that the operation was organized, calm, and that there were no injuries or violent clashes. And to be clear, this is not our analysis of what took place last night. National independent journalists acknowledge what the police department did yesterday, and they were on the ground to see it. And I want to be clear that we will continue to use this level of professionalism. And we saw the intersectionality of all the things we have been working on. Drones allowed us to do a complete analysis of the Hamilton building and the location. We were able to know how to precisely go in and conduct the operation, making sure the encryption of our radios, because they were not able to monitor and hear our deployment tactics. It allowed us to have the element of surprise that we went on the ground, training with our CRT team, precisionally knowing how to go in and conduct a professional operation. We didn't wake up and executed a plan. This is a plan that has been put in place since January 2022, when we understood our police department had to be prepared for uncertainties like this. And so the request we received in writing could not have been clearer. Well, those who broke into the building did include students. It was led by individuals who are not affiliated with the university. The school needed the NYPD's assistance to clear Hamilton Hall and the encampments outside. A dual operation on the grounds that took place successfully, clearing the tents, taking back and reclaiming Hamilton Hall. And we said from the beginning that students have a right to protest, and free speech is the cornerstone of our society. But as our major concern, we knew and we saw that there were those who were never concerned about free speech. They were concerned about chaos. It was about external actors hijacking peaceful protests and influence students to escalate. There's nothing peaceful about barricading buildings, destroying property, or dismantling security cameras. We cannot allow what should be a lawful protest to turn into a violent spectacle that saves and serves no purpose, as I said. There's no place for acts of hate in our city. We made that clear. That's from anti-Semitism to Islamophobia to anti-Sikhism and other communities, as our AAPI community. We have been consistent. There's no place for hate in this city. And I want to continue to commend the professionalism of the police department and to thank Columbia University. It was a tough decision. We understood that. But with the very clear evidence of their observation and the clear evidence from our intelligence division that they understood it was time to move and the action had to end. And we brought it to a peaceful conclusion. And we're going to continue to coordinate with Columbia, as we have been from the start, and all of our academic institutions, to find a peaceful middle of allowing our young people to protest without violence. We support the right of free speech and open debate. We will always protect the right to protest, but we must balance the right with keeping students, the school, and our city safe. And it is a combined effort that we're going to continue to move in the right direction to accomplish this goal. We know that this is only a comma in the full sentence of public protection in the city. This is not a celebratory moment. We should never had to get here in the first place. We can't create environments while children could be in danger, and we must push back on all attempts to radicalize our young people in the city like we're seeing across the entire globe. Commissioner, thank you for a job well done, and turn it over to you at this time.
And good morning, and thank you, Mayor Adams. So yesterday, the NYPD received written notification.
Well, we were hearing the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, explain a little bit more about the context of those arrests in both Columbia University in Manhattan and City College of New York as well. 300 arrests were made on Tuesday, he explained, and also blamed outside agitators for whipping up what he described was not in the spirit of peaceful protest.
Yes, very interesting, wasn't it, what he said about how freedom of speech must be upheld, how freedom of protest is a fundamental right, but how that needs to be balanced with the safety of students. He also spoke about how young people are being radicalised not only on student campuses in the United States, but around the world. He's seeing this as part of a global radicalisation. I'm not sure if that's shifting the blame there or if that is true to say, but those are the views of the New York City mayor there.
But certainly, as we can see from the debris, frankly, left by these protests, this isn't people exercising their First Amendment rights. This isn't free speech. This isn't people engaging in healthy and open debate. This is people smashing windows.
Yeah.
It's barricading buildings. It's breaking property. That is not protected under the First Amendment of the United States of America.
It's quite shocking to see how this foreign conflict is playing out in colleges up and down the United States because, you know, there are so many accusations from Jewish students to some university authorities that they're not taking anti-Semitism on campus seriously enough, not dealing with it when it occurs and not clamping down on it. And now we see, well, what you can see there, riot police, no less, storming what was a bit of a barricade at Columbia University.
Now we're going to look at live pictures here from Los Angeles, where a counter-demonstration calling on Hamas to free the hostages, of course, has been set up. This incited what many saw were clashes between pro-Palestine and pro-Israel protesters at University College campuses in Los Angeles, this at UCLA. And we can see here a heavy police presence trying to keep the peace here at this counter-demonstration.
Yes, if you thought things were getting heated in this country when it came to our student campuses, our universities, it's another level, isn't it, in the United States? It's another level. So there you go, the police presence there, a counter-protest against the pro-Palestine protests there, Israeli flag saying Hamas release the hostages. We're going to come back to this, but up next, we're going to see if the SNP, can they survive today's no-confidence vote? Does it matter at this stage? Are there enough people behind that vote of no confidence? Here are live pictures as the vote commences. Live pictures of Holyrood there.
Hello again, it's time to take a look at the Met Office forecast for GB News. A lot of cloud today, a few showers around, but many places will be dry and some places will even experience a bit of warm sunshine. Low pressure is moving away. That's the low that brought some rain in the west during Tuesday. The rain's still there in places, but it's easing and actually many places are cheering up now. A much drier and brighter day for western parts compared with yesterday. Meanwhile, further east, more cloud compared with yesterday and some showery rain, especially for eastern Scotland, where it will remain cool, 11 to 12 Celsius. Elsewhere, further west and south, actually much warmer than it has been, up to 20 or 21 Celsius in parts of the southeast, especially where we'll get some cloud breaks. But we will see a thickening of the cloud and some outbreaks of heavy, potentially thundery rain arrive overnight, particularly after midnight, especially for central southern England, then into the southwest and South Wales. The risk of frequent lightning, heavy rain and hail in places. Those thunderstorms will be hit and miss, but we'll see an area of fairly heavy rain across South Wales and South West England as we begin Thursday. Thundery showers in one or two places elsewhere. Otherwise, it's drier further north and increasingly sunny for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, North West England, Eastern Scotland and Eastern England, seeing a lot of low cloud and feeling cool here, but much warmer elsewhere, up to 23 Celsius in East Anglia.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. 30 minutes worth of queues southbound on the M6 as you head towards Knutsford Junction 19. A 5-mile tailback is for a collision on the hard shoulder, so all the lanes are open, but we still see big queues. To Ramsey in Essex, on the westbound side of Tinker Street is blocked from Main Road to the Maltings and queuing. A 4-vehicle collision there continues to cause a lot of congestion. Now, both sides of the M25 have the inside lane closed off between the Clackett Lane services and the Seven turn off at junction 5 for emergency repairs, slow going clockwise and anti-clockwise, and Londonderry and Coleraine, the Milburn Road, the A2 is currently closed between the A29 Portrush Road and Union Street and queuing, and that is all due to a collision there this afternoon as well. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just coming up to 2:45. Now, the SNP government in Scotland, minority government now, is today facing a crucial no-confidence vote that could see all ministers being forced to resign if it passes.
Is that a big if, Tom?
It's a big if.
It's a big if. Now, this all comes after First Minister Humza Yousaf was forced to resign on Monday after the rather abrupt collapse of a power-sharing deal with the Greens. It plunged the SNP into crisis.
Well, today's no-confidence motion was tabled by the Labour Party before Humza Yousaf resigned, but now that he has, it's unlikely to pass. And of course, the Greens have called for it to be scrapped. Initially, they were minded to back some of these no-confidence motions, but now that Humza Yousaf is gone, it doesn't look like they will.
Interesting. Joining us now is Alan Cochrane, former Scottish editor of The Telegraph. Alan, why are the Greens not backing this then?
Gosh, you're a bloodthirsty lot. You want more bodies, don't you? Well, there's no point. There's no point. I mean, it's quite good as a further embarrassment. In fact, it's very good as a further embarrassment for the SNP, for Labour to keep this motion alive. But quite frankly, Labour were beaten to the punch by the Tories on this one, in that the Tories tabled the really sexy one that finished the career of, what was his name again? Oh, yes, Humza Yousaf. But the Labour Party decided to keep their motion alive because, to be fair to them, if there is a collapse of the SNP government, which there ain't going to be, by the way, and there's a new election in Scotland, then it's Labour who will benefit massively. I mean, the opinion polls suggest that the Nationalists could lose something like half their seats, parliamentary common seats, in an election. But I think the best we can hope for today, from my point of view as a unionist, is more embarrassment for the SNP.
Now, I suppose this all ties into incentives, doesn't it? I mean, looking at the polls, practically the only party in the Scottish Parliament that would really want there to be an early election would be the Scottish Labour Party. The Scottish Tories are probably going to vote for this, despite the fact that were there to be an election, they might go backwards a little bit. But frankly, the Greens seem to have...
I agree with that.
No?
I'm not sure
Why
I agree
not?
with that. I said, well, I think the Tories have got 6 seats currently. I think they'll keep them.
Oh, I'm talking about a Scottish parliamentary election, not a House of Commons election.
Oh no, sorry. A parliamentary election, yes. Well, I don't know, it's 2 years away. You mean a Scottish parliamentary election? That's 2 years away.
If there were to be an early Scottish parliamentary election.
Yeah. I can't see that the Tories would necessarily lose. They've got a good
Well, they're currently the
campaign.
second largest party. It's likely they'd go to be the third largest party behind the Labour Party and the SNP.
Well, possibly. If it's true that Labour has, excuse me, succeeded to that extent, that would be the case. I don't think the Tories have got an awful lot to worry about, given that are getting credit, not enough credit in my view, for the way that Yusuf was brought down. But I do think that it's rich for the Greens to say, oh, can we not have a bit of peace and quiet now? And now that we are not going to throw the First Minister out, they're happy with what they've got. They've got a body in the shape of the First Minister of Scotland, and that's as much as they're going to get. Unfortunately, from my point of view, and again from the unionist point of view, they're still going to be calling the shots. They're not going to be part of a coalition. The Green 7 MSPs on the backbenches of the Scottish Parliament will still have a very big say in what legislation is passed.
Yeah, good point. Alan, what does this tell us about Scottish politics and the way it's going? I mean, who are the SNP going to elect as their new leader? Are they going to stick to the, so-called woke, sort of progressive? That's what Humza Yousaf saw himself as. Are we going to see another continuity candidate at the top, or are they going to go in a different direction? What do you reckon?
I think the current favourite is John Swinney, who was the deputy under Sturgeon. John is a fully paid-up member of the woke battalions, I'm afraid. He has supported Nicola Sturgeon and the Green Coalition all the way down the 3 years it's been in existence. If the Scots, and I wrote this in the Telegraph the other day, if they want a change, if they want a non-continuity candidate, a change of direction away, they've got to vote for Kate Forbes. But it's going to be a big job for her to beat Swinney, because the Telegraph poll suggests that the voters of Scotland would back Kate Forbes' leadership. Unfortunately, it's not the voters who vote on this one, it's the members of the SNP. And the view currently, and the polls back this up, is that Swinney gets the nod. Now, John Swinney's been around a long time. He was actually the worst leader the SNP ever had. They notched up a mere 19% of the total electorate when he was leader, and the SNP wisely chucked him out. And they've done quite well since then. But, I mean, I think it's going to be between Swinney and Forbes. If the Scots want to get away from this nonsense of gender equality and all that hate crime, and if they want to get back to the basics of, what school can I send my kids to? Can I get treatment in hospital for my
no, you're absolutely.
They're stuck between the public on one hand and the Parliament on the other, because they need the Greens to keep voting with them. It's a really tricky situation for them. Don't envy it. But
I think they'd be mad to stick with the same, though, surely.
But then they wouldn't be able to pass anything through Parliament.
Stick with the same. Alan Cochrane, former Scottish editor of Telegraph, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak to us on that one. They've got to choose someone different.
Yes. Well, let's bring you an update now on the story at the top of the hour this afternoon. The Home Office has revealed that the first migrants set to be deported to Rwanda have been detained in a series of operations that took place across the country this very week.
Well, we're joined by GB News Home Security Editor Mark White. And Mark, before that, I believe you have some breaking news on the number of small boat crossings.
Well, yes, if ever there was an indication of just how desperately, as far as the government is concerned, the Rwanda deterrent is needed, another bumper day in the Channel. At least 400 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel so far today, with other boats still in the water. Now, that takes the number who've crossed the English Channel in just 8 days, so just over a week, to 1,700. An indication there of just what we're looking at in terms of numbers and how difficult a job this is ahead for the government in really coming up with an effective deterrent, because they're talking about 2,200 detention places in immigration detention for those that they round up to then deport to Rwanda. Will almost that number have crossed in just the space of 8 days?
Wow.
A really shocking statistic there. It does show the scale of the challenge here, and really that just one migrant being sent to Rwanda will not do the business. Rishi Sunak spoke about a steady drumbeat that needs to take place, but I suppose that's still to come. But Mark, also on that issue of the wider sort of operation that we've seen from the Home Office, this is the start of something that really they're trying to play out very, very publicly.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, opposition politicians might be somewhat suspicious of the timing of these raids coming in terms of the Home Office informing us about it just on the eve of the local elections. But regardless, it's clear the government is desperate to show some momentum in the Rwanda policy after now 2 years of stagnation. They got their wish last week, of course, with the Rwanda bill becoming law. Now we're in the process of those asylum seekers who they've singled out, and we're told it's 5,700 in this first cohort to go to Rwanda. They're now in the process of rounding up at least some of those who will be detained for the next 9 to 11 weeks, when we're told the first flights will get off the ground, or at least that's what the government is hoping.
Thanks so much, Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor. Great to speak to you. Right, that's it from us today. And we have Martin Dobney in the studio, because he's up next. What's up?
Well, it's lovely to have some company in Westminster. Fantastic show, as ever. I agree with Mark. Cynical timing of these Rwanda raids, just like in Dublin today. They've magically cleared out 200 asylum seekers from their tented city, because, of course, they've got elections coming up in the EU in June, and the anti-EU parties look to make big gains. School stabbing in Sheffield 2 weeks after the one in Wales. Are we seeing an epidemic of these breaking out? Are we seeing copycats? And are we seeing something akin to the school shootings in America? Is this taking grip? Plus, we're picking up on the slavery debate you had earlier. Fantastic, great fun debate. We're going for round 2 of that ding-dong. And, of course, will the SNP implode? That debate and that vote will follow fully live.
Yes, no, it's very, very interesting. We'll be following it closely. Of course, they've started the debate, but it will conclude in your airtime. Very neat, very tidy. Thanks for watching Good Afternoon Britain. See you next time.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a cloudy day for many of us with a few showers around, but heavier, more persistent and potentially thundery rain arrives from the near continent overnight. An old frontal system becomes reactivated as humid air arrives from Central Europe, and that's going to lead to some outbreaks of rain through the evening across the Midlands, central southern England, Wales, Northern Ireland, perhaps southwest Scotland. And then by midnight, thundery showers arrive from the continent. Hit and miss downpours, but these could be lively if they occur across central southern England into the Midlands and mid-Wales by the morning. Frequent lightning, hail, torrential downpours. So really it's across the southern third of the UK where we could see some heavy rain as we start off Thursday, persistent wet weather for Wales and the southwest, thundery showers elsewhere, much drier and calmer for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Scotland. Some decent sunny spells in places, particularly for central and western Scotland. And feeling warm here with the sunshine, up to 21 or even 22 Celsius, perhaps 23 in 1 or 2 very warm spots. Also warm for Northern Ireland through the Midlands, but cold on the North Sea coast with the breeze coming from the North Sea, a lot of low cloud. That continues into Friday. And on Friday, we're going to see the best of the sunshine in the north of Scotland as well as the south of England, in between cloud and outbreaks of rain. Saturday sees further rain arrive from the south and rain or showers on Sunday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
You're the winner of the Great British Giveaway.
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God, are you joking?
You're joking. Really? Seriously, it's not a wine. What is it?
Oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For a chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel. And from tomorrow,
the people decide.
As the country heads to the polls in a rush of elections.
We'll take you through the night as the first results come in.
And we'll pick up at breakfast
with the very best guests and analysis.
And on the weekend, the results won't stop, and neither will we.
We'll explore what it all means for you as we look ahead to the general election.
Continuing coverage live from tomorrow at midnight on GB News.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly